Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the Michael Dukes Show.com for information on how to...
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
Agreed.
What more could you want from a fire?
That's just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, yeah. Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello and good morning to you, my friends. It is a Monday, a rainy Monday. We needed it, though. Man, I'm smelling it. Went outside last night, was letting the dogs out, and just that first rain of the season, so beautiful, so earthy. What else do you say? How to just that kind of wet, moist, mulchy smell. It was just so good. First rain of the season, and we are ready to dive into it and get things going on. Green popping up too. I don't know about on the peninsula. Lots of green popping out all over. So definitely spring has sprung, and we're ready for a good summer. Let's just fingers crossed it takes it slow this year. I don't want the summer to zip on by. I need that green. I need that sunlight. Just want to feel alive, man. I just want to feel alive. All right, so what do we got going on for today? Today we're going to get started. We're going to be talking about the local election up in Fairbanks, where the Fairbanks North Star Borough Assembly is attempting to bust the tax cap. The tax cap has been in place for 35 years, maybe 40 years, close to it. It's a citizens initiated cap that has held down the size and scope and the growth of government for years, and it's gone a long way to making sure that everything is, in fact, the calculation that was done here, I don't know, about 10 years ago, was the amount of money they've saved the citizens of the borough, about $250 million over the course of the life of the cap by holding the size and spending of government growth down. And the borough assembly in its infinite, because we have a prop, and get another $10 million above the cap. That's what they're calling for right now. Another $10 million above the cap. And and that it's all going to go to education. Now, interestingly enough, arbitrarily just discovered an extra $13 million just laying around in some. Sorry, hey, we found this extra. Gosh, it's safe. They found their extra $10 million. They don't need to raise the cap. No. Never let a crisis go to waste, Not only did they find $13 million in the couch cushions, they are now going to go ahead and move forward with this vote, and try and scam the the property owner on this whole thing, is that, oh, this is all for education. It's all for the children. It will be spent on the children, which, of course, it may or may not be spent on the children, because the money cannot be appropriate. It can't go directly to anything. It has to go to the general fund, and then the assembly members themselves would have to then vote on it every year to go to education, for education, over and over and over again. It's it's disappointing. Let's just put it that way. It's not surprising, but disappointing that this is where and the direction that our legislature, that our assembly, I guess I should say, the local legislature there in Fairbanks, is going. But and on the other hand, by the way, this is what I love. They've still got $33 million appropriated for a new doggy, the Pooch Palace. $3 million. Wow. The Puppy Palace. So anyway, that's still going on, even though they, we're we're short money for the kids. Even after they found all that money going on. So anyway, coming on to talk with us this morning about this is going to be school board member Melissa Burnett. She's going to come on board and talk with us about that in hour one. And I'm sure it'll be a far-ranging discussion talking about the education system and the amount of monies that we're spending, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then I'm sure we'll also be discussing the vote and how that money affects it, and what exactly why exactly they're looking for specific monies, what they're trying to fill, what hole they're trying to fill with that. It's here this morning with Melissa Burnett. Then in hour two, we'll be talking with we're going to be talking goes from here. But I can tell you right now, it's going to be a full boat of discussions this morning on a variety of things, and we hope that you will stick around with us and join us for the rest of the show. Interestingly enough, I just saw this early this morning. I missed this. Apparently it wasn't even written about until 18 hours ago. So apparently I didn't miss it on Friday. But the House majority has allowed the Senate Bill 88, the new pension bill, has now moved into the House. They're going to be. It's a last minute review, is how the headlines reads in the ADN. Lawmakers aim for a last minute review of the public pension reform. Now, in April, Calvin Schrage attempted to discharged the Senate bill from the State Affairs Committee, which is where it was moved over into the State Affairs Committee. And it would he tried to roll it out. Both of those he tried twice in the same week, but it was a pretty narrow split. 19 out of 40 members voted in favor of the move on the second go round. House Republicans who opposed the discharge vote said they're still waiting on the new actuarial analysis requested by Senate members earlier this year. Basically saying how much is this going to cost? What is what's the overall, all this kind of stuff. In response to all this, and apparently the analysis are now available as of 4 or 5 days ago. It finally became available. In response to that becoming available, House State Affairs Subcommittee, led by Craig Johnson, scheduled a hearing on the bill for Tuesday, tomorrow, at 6 p.m. Johnson said Friday that he's not crazy about the bill, but the intention would be to transfer its review to the full State Affairs Committee. He said, we're going to try to get everything out on the table and filter out as much as we can and kick it back to the committee and see what the rule of the body is. Even if the committee passed the bill, its final adoption this year would require several additional hearings before reaching a vote of the House floor. It would have to go through Labor and Commerce and the Finance Committee, at a minimum. Both Johnson and Schrage said it was potentially possible, but I don't know if I would hold your breath. Now, there's been a national push to overhaul retirement benefits around the state. Some of the folks against this bill said the best thing to do would be to up the rate of the defined contribution plan. That would be the smart thing to do. But we'll see. Everybody wants this defined benefits. And of course, we have no idea how much it's going to cost. Now, this new actuarial model that came out here a week ago might give us a better idea on it. But as of right now, there's been no potential cost other than assurances from the sponsors of the bill whether this was the right thing to do. No matter what, this was the right thing to do. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with this here. Oh man, it just on 6 o'clock, 6 p.m. tomorrow. That's when it's going to be ready to go. 6 p.m. tomorrow. They're going to sit down and talk about this. The House State Affairs Subcommittee. So it doesn't even get to the committee. This is the subcommittee of the committee, just in case you were confused. And we'll see where it goes from there. All right. We got more coming up. Melissa Burnett's going to be our guest up next. The Michael Duke Show continues. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Back with more right after this.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. So, I can't. It's real bad. Has it cleared up? No. Okay. Okay. All right. I'm going to fix this here right now. You guys just hold the line. Okay. Well, let's see if that did it any better. I mean, I don't know. It was super choppy. Super choppy. This hopefully is much better. All right. Let's see what else we got going on here. Let me mash this button and turn that off. And so far so good. It's only bad when you talk. What does that mean? What does that mean? It's only bad when I either the technically bad, or is it just bad that I'm talking? I'm not sure which one of those things is. All right. Who's the guest in hour 2? Robb Myers. Way mo better, says Jeffrey Coghill. Okay, so I think we're good. Let me go over here and match this around. And Melissa Burnett
I'm here.
joins us. She's here. All right, she's here. She's good. It's all fantastic. And sounds good. And I've pushed all the buttons. Everything works. Look at that.
Yay.
That's fantastic. All right, Melissa, you were ready to dive into this, and
Yeah.
I mean, I'd like to get down into the weeds of the specifics to begin with of what exactly the powers that be in the legislature are, or excuse me, in the assembly. I'm stuck on the legislature this morning. In the assembly, what exactly they are saying is going on, why they need the money, what's happening, and I kind of want a little bit of a background before we dive into the why vote no kind of thing. So if that works for you, that works for me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everybody needs to understand exactly where all this comes from, what the school board has done, what our budget looks like, and why I specifically have already voted no.
Right, and because you can still vote, you can vote early, right?
Yes.
Starting last Saturday, you could vote, so it's all good. All right, I think that is good. We're about a minute. Ooh, I'm gonna mute you there for a second. I'll get my own voice back. We're gonna jump back into it here in just a hot second. Melissa Burnett, Fairbanks North Starborough School Board, is our guest. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. This is all good, and we're going to hear the ding. And look at that. We got it all fixed this morning. I'm feeling pretty excited about it. So here we go. Jumping back into it. Don't go anywhere. We're going to start with Melissa Burnett here in just a hot second.
Public enema number 1. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number 1, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
I am not. I'm a perfect angel. I've said it many times. Perfect angel. That's me. Not a pain in the anything. Hello, good morning. It's the Michael Duke Show. Hour 1 continues this morning. Joined now by our guest, ready to talk about Fairbanks, local Fairbanks issues, and more. Specifically, the school board and this upcoming special vote, which is finishing up tomorrow. The early voting's been going on already, but Melissa Burnett, Fairbanks School Board member, joins us this morning to discuss. Good morning, Melissa. How are you?
I'm good. And yes, Jeannie, I am absolutely down in the Red Bull this morning. Dukes was like, 6:20, you ready? I was like, all right, let's do this. Good morning, Duke.
Good morning. Good morning. All right. Well, let's chat a bit. First and foremost, give me the background on this exactly. The justification for why the school board wants to bust the tax cap. What the justification was. How it got started, and then let's break it down a little bit. Once that extra dollars were found in the couch cushions, what's going? Give us the full rundown. So start us from the beginning. Talk to me like I'm 5, okay? So that I can.
You got it.
All right.
I'm good at that, Dukes. You know that. So, way it all began, if you've been paying much attention to our budget season and everything that's happening, we got hit with a $28 million deficit for our district. And with that $28 million deficit came a number of cuts, which included Ben Eielson Junior Senior High School. It was one of four schools that was actually on the chopping block with us. And it was a very contentious conversation when it came to the school closures. And the school board had decided that instead of closing the other three schools. So we chose to close Ben Allison Junior Senior High School, which absolutely I understand that everybody is very upset about the politicalness behind that. And I'm here to tell you there was no politicalness behind that. It made sense. We're not offering the courses to have those good rapports for colleges, to have that good report card for a good college if that's where your child is headed. The class offerings out there are minimal. We have a hard time getting staff to go out there. It's very hard to even have that school function, and so that made sense. But the other three, the school board, and if you watch those budget sessions, you'll see only Tim Doran and I were the ones that were like, "Hey, let's do this. Hey, yes, let's do this. Hey, let's do that." And the school board was like, no, let's not do that. Let's ask for $64.2 million from the borough, which they originally wanted to ask for $67 million. And if you saw from the news minor reports and stuff, I was like, guys, this is ridiculous. This is a complete unicorn of a number that you guys think the borough can just come up with. And I was not going to go for $67 million. I fought that and fought that and fought that. The school board still did not want to close the schools that were necessary to make our deficit come down and to balance our budget. We needed to close the schools. We needed to contract out custodial. There were a few things that the school board was like, absolutely not. This is not what we're doing. We'd rather ask for $64.2 million from the borough. With that being said, there was a meeting where Bryce Ward, the mayor, he came to our school board meeting at my ask. I had asked him to come to the board meeting and tell us exactly what he was planning in his budget to give to the district. And so he did. He came forward, told us $54 million. We can do what we did last year. Last year they gave us 50, and then they came back through and gave us a supplemental 4 million to make a total of 54. And so that's where the mayor said $54 million is where my budget is. That's what I can give you. That's what we're doing. The school district was like, okay, well, we're going to ask for more than that. So 64.2 million was still our ask, even though the mayor said 54 million is where we're at. So there's the 10 million that is needed. That there's the election. That's why this election is needed. There's that $10 million. Now, the borough has, like the district has, we have all of these funds. And at the end of the year, things start coming back of this is what was unspent in this fund. This is what was unspent in this fund. This is kind of what you still have. Well, the borough has $13 million right now. And from what I understand, that 13 million, 9.2 of it could be promised to the district right now. And then I'm also hearing there's like 30 to 40 million in another budget over here. So there's some money that the borough has where they could right now tell the district we can do da da da, whatever it is that they feel that we could do.
Well, so I guess my question is of the $64 million. I mean, you said absolutely that the higher amount was a unicorn. How much of that 64 million is just nice to have rather than must have, right? I mean, is the unicorn as well? I mean, could they get away with 54 million? Is the question. That's the bigger question, in your opinion.
In my opinion, and this is aside from the school board, in Melissa Burnett's opinion, yes. If we did the hard thing today, or if we would have done the hard thing a couple weeks ago, close the other schools that we needed to close, contract out custodial, it would have been hard. We may have still seen an increase in class sizes. I can't say for sure, but that yes, we could have done what we needed to do as long as the school board was willing to do the hard thing. But instead of doing the hard thing, we put it onto the borough and said, okay, this is now on you. And yes, that $64.2 million is still a rainbow unicorn of a number. It was an absolute insane number. I wanted, honestly, and if you go back to those budget meetings, I was pushing down to 60. And I understand 60 was still a bit of a reach, but it was something I was at least more, it was palatable for me to come up with 4 million, 5 million instead of this $10 million that we now need to come up with. So that leads us into this election. And so I've already voted. I went and voted last week. Early voting was open at the Shoppers Forum Mall. You can still vote absentee, so you can still go in. You can still early vote. And I already voted, and I voted no. And the reason I voted no is because, one, the board did not do the things we should have done to help our budget. That's just point blank. We did not do the things we should have done. I stand by. We should have contracted out custodial, and I understand that those are people's jobs, but the company that we were bringing in to contract out custodial had already told the board that they would hire our custodians and our janitors, so that it was, they literally would go from our payroll to their payroll.
Right.
So our employees still had a job,
Right.
just not with the district.
Well, I guess one of the bigger questions, and Brian asks it here, how do you get hit? How do you get hit when you said, well, we got hit with a $28 million deficit? How do you, I mean, it's not like those things, it's not like you don't see those things coming, right? I mean, all of a sudden, hey, by the way, we're going to be short. This is not something that like, oh, surprise. I mean, it does, you should see it coming. Did nobody, if not, did somebody not do their job? I mean, that's my big question here.
No, that's actually a really excellent question. And when I say it, we got hit with it, the board knew it was coming. Everybody knew it was coming. We had just in August approved the teacher contracts and raises. We went through this 3-year negotiation process where the teachers were fighting for an increase in raises. Now, don't get me wrong, our teachers absolutely deserve their raises. That is what, full stop. Our teachers deserve more pay. But deserving and what we can do are two different things. And we had been telling them for years, we can't do this. Well, we came back around and we did 1% in year 1 and then 3% in years 2 and 3. So when that happened and the board voted to do the contract with the raises, I specifically, and so did April Smith at the time, who was on the board, said this will lead to a massive deficit in our budget, and we will be in a predicament where we will be closing schools. And that was before we realized we needed to close schools for consolidation purposes. So we knew this was coming because we signed the teacher contracts. I mean, when you give massive raises and you don't have a budget for it, and when I asked that question, when the superintendent came to me and said, this is my intention with the contracts, I said, Luke, what are we going to do when we're going to have to close schools because of our budget? And he said, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Here's the bridge.
Here's the bridge. Yeah, exactly. And then everybody acts shocked, I tell you, that you're out of money. I mean, you can't do it. Now, after finding the $13 million in the various accounts, which again raises a lot of questions about how much excess money is sitting in accounts around the borough. You just mentioned that you'd heard something along the lines of, $30 million floating around out there. But once that money was found, they still said it's not enough and we're proceeding ahead with this vote. I mean, because, again, 9.2 million available to you right now. That's pretty close to the $10 million deficit that they were looking for. What's the justification to move forward once you found all this money?
And that's my question. And that's another reason I myself have voted no. There is no justification. Here's the other part of it, right? So you were on the borough assembly, so you understand how this works. The district, we don't need the check tomorrow. We don't. We do not need the check tomorrow. All we need is a promise that, hey, we can do this and we can help fund you this much. And then we can go on with our budgetary process and we can move on. You can give us the check in December. So this whole special election and the $126,000 that we spent to do it, The tax cap question comes around. What is it, every year, other years,
2
every
years.
2 years?
Every 2 years, and it's on the ballot in October. So
Yes.
what's the rush? If you didn't need the money right now, then what's the rush to get it on a special election? Not
Yes.
only the cost of the special election, but the fact that, as you said, the school board, I mean, they've spent $100,000 in taxpayer money to educate, if you can't hear the air quotes there, the public on the benefits of this. It basically says vote for the vote yes. It's a vote yes campaign being paid for by your tax dollars.
Yeah.
And no justification. They're just going to do it because they know in the future that they're going to need those monies. And by pushing that above the cap, it's going to be outside the cap forever. It's going to be ongoing.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing that I don't think people get too, is that this is going to be forever. And that means that, so next year, $10 million, the year after, $10 million. And so the thing that the legislature right now is having the most difficult time with when it comes to increased funding for school districts is that piece. You hear it constantly. The districts don't want us to earmark the money. They don't want us to tell us what they can use it for. Well, technically they can't. And that's where the borough's at. They cannot tell or they cannot earmark money out of funds. It goes into a general fund,
Right.
and
They're not,
it's
you cannot dedicate funds, you can, especially by initiative or by vote like this, you can't dedicate funds to go to a specific thing. The Constitution of the state of Alaska prohibits dedicated funds. So the funds have to go to the general fund to then be subject to the appropriation process of the legislative body, in this case, the Borough Assembly. So this idea that, oh, vote yes to save our schools, there's no guarantee that that money is actually going to go to schools.
That's correct. And so October, we've got 3 seats up on the borough assembly, 3. And all 3 of them are liberal members of the assembly. If all 3 of them switch, I can't promise that the borough assembly would give that extra 10 million if it passed. Like, it is dependent on the body at hand. So, and David Boyle, I'm seeing some questions here. I just want to tell David he's spot on there. Absolutely.
Well, we'll get to that.
I
Yeah, we'll get to that here in a second. We'll get to
Yeah.
some of the questions here from David and company in just a second. So you're advocating that folks vote no on this because it's not. Again, they found some money. They don't necessarily need it, and this is nothing more than a long-term money grab to put more money into the borough's pockets to be spent on something, whether it's
Well,
education
and
or something else.
it's also a very emotional plea that they're doing, and that's another side that's kind of ticking me off right now. This whole save our schools, and no disrespect whatsoever to the other side's campaign. There's some pretty incredible people over there that are working the pro Prop A. So I do want to say that. But this save our schools plea, this isn't saving our schools, Michael. That this isn't doing anything. We're still going to close schools. We
Right.
are entering into strategic planning to close schools.
And I want to get into that when we come back, because I think that's a bigger point that's now is coming out around the state. This is not simply a Fairbanks thing.
No.
It's coming out around the state, and we're going to talk about this here in just a moment. Melissa Burnett is our guest. We're going to continue with her. She's with the Fairbanks North Starborough School Board. We will return in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. It's what we do every day, or at least we try. I mean, it doesn't always work out that way, but that's how it is. Back with Melissa Burnett right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Excuse me. All right, Melissa Burnett, our guest here, and I do want to get to some of the questions, which will only, I mean, we, podcast and everything else, but David Boyle asks, I think these are some good questions. So, Melissa, how much COVID one-time money was spent on reoccurring costs such as salaries and benefits? Is there some of that going on there?
There was, yes. I can't give a number, but there was. And as for COVID funds, what I can say is that there is none left. The school district for Fairbanks, we used it all. There is zero COVID money left. And we do have an $8 million fund balance currently.
$8 million remaining in the fund balance. Okay.
Yeah.
David goes on to say, and David Boyle is an education advocate. He's been on the program several times. So if you wonder why I'm throwing a lot of David's questions up there, it's because he's got his finger in the pie. He knows what's going on. How much are the benefit package for union teachers? Well, that is where much of the cost is. I imagine it's pretty significant because I was told when I was in Fairbanks last time I ran into somebody, and we had some lengthy discussions, and this was somebody who was up there they had their finger in the finance pie of the thing. 100% benefit packages. 100%. If you made $100,000, you got $100,000 benefit package. That's what's going on in the school districts, right?
Yep. Yeah, pretty much. And anybody, and here's the other side of it, though, what really sucks, and this is part of that teacher retention problem that we're having, is new teachers that went away. So they don't have those glorious benefit packages to look forward to. So, when you talk about teacher retention and recruitment issues, those benefit packages are meant to be for those tenured teachers. And yeah, we do. We have some pretty expensive packages out there where they're pretty much getting everything.
But should they? I mean, should it be reasonable for a person to expect to make, a starting salary of, $75,000 a year for 9 months work, by the way, $75,000 plus $75,000 in benefits on top? I mean, that just seems excessive.
Yeah.
Let me just say that yeah, sure, great. I mean, you got the old guard that's getting it and the new ones are not, but that sounds like that's probably market based, right? I mean, you just can't afford.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Michael. This is why I had a problem with our teacher contracts and these massive raises we just gave. And I was like, what are we going to do when we have to start closing schools? And they're like, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Well, hey, guess what? Smacked right in the face with the bridge.
Yeah, the thing is, you can see the bridge from here when you make the decision. You're like, we'll cross that bridge but it's like 5 feet away. I know, but we'll get to it when we get there.
Yeah.
David says, if the board approves a teacher union contract and does not have the money for pay for it, isn't that fiduciary irresponsibility? And shouldn't board members then be subject to recall?
Absolutely. I mean, we are elected by the people, and that is absolutely irresponsible. Irresponsible. Words are hard sometimes. I talk a lot.
Words.
No, it's absolutely irresponsible. I don't disagree.
And look, I think, teachers do a bang up job, but this goes back to things like the BSA and the fact that, none of those dollars are mandated to end up in the classroom, that a lot of these dollars are being sucked up by overhead, facilities maintenance, custodial, administration. There's no guarantee that any of those dollars are going to actually make it into the actual classroom. That's a huge problem.
Yeah, absolutely. It's again, this is why I am hardcore advocating that we vote no tomorrow. And if you can go vote absentee today, go do it. It's, what's really funny is I was talking to somebody else who's actually on the pro Prop A side, and they agreed with everything I had to say. And then I looked at them, I said, so why are you voting to increase property taxes when you know that the district has been irresponsible and we need to do the hard thing? We need to close what we need to close. We need to contract out what we need to contract. We need to do our jobs. Pretty much. We need to do our jobs and do the cuts and not put it on the shoulders of our borough residents. I mean, we honestly, it's up to the state. It's not up to the borough, and the state's not wrong either in the direction that they're going and the reasons that they're having a hard time funding things. You want to talk about things in our district that aren't okay. Why do you think we have a massive pullout right now?
And what was their response when you said that? When you said why, if you agreed with everything I just said, why are you still vote? What was the reaction?
Because they don't want schools to close. That's their reaction. And then I tell them,
This is all about emotion. Yeah,
yeah,
this is all about emotion. This has nothing to do with fiscal responsibility. It has nothing to do with reality. It's all about emotion at this point.
absolutely.
All right, we got the ding. We're going to be jumping back into it. Brian says when you hear the ding, it's time to sing. That means you can sing if you want during the break.
No.
I'm going to hit the mute button here because nobody needs to. I'm not going to sing either. Oh, volare. Whoa. All right, we're going to do it. Here we go. Jumping back into it. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell. Let's do it. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
That's right. I'm not your daddy. Although I could be persuaded. All right, let's continue on here. We have Melissa Burnett with us. She is on the Fairbanks North Star Borough School Board. We've been talking about Prop A, which is the special election, which is officially tomorrow. Early voting is going on right now. You can go in today to the Borough Building and vote, or you can go to your local polling location tomorrow to vote. But the urge at this point is to vote no on Prop A. Melissa, let me ask you a hard question. We've been seeing this, and we saw this about 7-8 days ago, maybe 10 days ago. Happened down in Anchorage. Big article in the ADN talking specifically about schools. And they had Jim Anderson from the Anchorage School District get up there along with Jarrett Bryant, and they admitted that, hey, look, we're still going to have to close some schools, and it has nothing to do with the budget. That was a mistake on our part to say it was from, when we said it was a budget problem, we didn't really mean that, which I found so disingenuous because, again, the emotional argument of our children, it's all a budget. No, they said it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with enrollment and demographics. And here in the break, you just said we're still going to be having discussions about closing schools. And that has nothing to do with budget, right, Melissa? This has to do with enrollment. You talked about consolidation. Ben Eielson High School was at what? 40% capacity, 45% capacity. So this has nothing to do with the budget. This has to do with that we have tons of empty student spaces around the borough because of the enrollment. Am I right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Back in, I want to say February or March, we actually put out an or a reduction in force, RIF. There you go, RIF plans. We did so many different plans. It's ridiculous over the last 6 weeks. But we just put RIF plans in place, meaning reduction in force, because we are losing, and I think they said 46 to 55 students a year right now is what we are losing in our district. So we don't have the student bodies. There's actually Barbara Haney, assembly member, a couple other people have shared the document from the Fairbanks North Star Borough School District that states what the capacity in each of our schools is. And a majority of our schools are sitting at around 49, 52%. I think we have a couple in the low 60s. So we have schools that they're not full. We have empty classrooms, empty spaces. And so, yeah, this is about consolidation. Now, with our budget, yes, we did put a price tag on what these schools would cost us or save us money if we close them, because yes, we were looking at our budget. But these school closures, we have already entered into strategic planning. On Tuesday, we have another meeting with Ed Elements, who is our people that are doing our strategic planning with us. And it's a 5-year plan, and with the intention of closing schools next year. We're going to reduce and consolidate our schools and make it so that, and then give buildings back to the borough, make it so that our district isn't paying for empty spaces.
Well, and again, This is part of the problem. I mean, the paperwork and the reporting that Barbara Haney and company have put out reports the actual capacities of the schools. But you have to remember, and this is something that we stumbled across on the assembly, those were not the original build capacities. Remember, a school could have been built to, when it was designed and built, could have been designed to hold 500 students. But see, through the wizardry of updating and they could say, well, we did say that each student needed 3 square feet or whatever, and so that's a 500 capacity school, but we've decided now that students actually need 4 square feet, and so the capacity that school was originally built for, say 500, is now 350. So that's not even the original capacities of the schools. That's the downgraded capacities of the schools, and still 45, 50%. I mean, Melissa, this all comes back to emotion, right? I mean, as you said, the debate over the 4 schools became this, please don't kill the school in my community where I grew up or my kids grew up or blah, 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 blah. I mean, this has nothing to do with reality. This has everything to do with emotion. Am I wrong?
No, you are not wrong at all. I can't tell you the amount of emails that I got saying, don't close my school. My school's the best. What are my children going to do? How dare you affect my children? I, and it was really disappointing, honestly, because many families came out and were like, my school's the best, and literally like trashing on the other schools in our district. And I most people know I do sit on the side pro education. I do believe in education funding and all of that for our children, but not this, not me. I don't sit on the school board for my 3 kids. I sit on the school board because our kids need somebody with some common sense and somebody who's going to look people in the eye and say, hey, hold up, wait a second. What is this actually doing for our kids and their learning, instead of what is this doing for you? And that's where we're at. It's all, what are we doing? Like, what are you doing for me? Not what are you doing for my kids?
Right.
It's so emotional, and it's just that, like, the save our schools. It's on all the signs. Save our schools. No, I'm sorry. I'm closing more schools. We
Right.
are.
If this gets passed and they pass the $10 million bust and they bust the tax cap and they start getting that money every year, even if the borough appropriated it, which is still not a given, it could or could not appropriate that $10 million. Even if it does appropriate it, that doesn't mean that schools are going to stay open, because you can't have schools at half capacity and continue to pay for them and expect and oh, I'm sorry, your kids may have to be bused another 10 minutes to another location or another 15 minutes to another location. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
You can't, I'm sorry, that's life. And it just can't be that you can have a school every 5 blocks and expect that they're going to be full and they're going to be, it makes no sense, not under the current model we have, but nobody wants to hear that.
Well, and I don't, people always seem to get upset when you say things like, well, so when I went to school, I lived 3 towns over from the school I actually went to school at, because in Michigan, I mean, your area school was an area of probably 7 or 8 small little towns and cities. And I would sit on the bus for an hour 20, an hour 30, an hour 40 minutes every day to school and home from school. So I understand parents don't want their kids to be on the buses for longer than they need to be. But, like, okay, well, then you can take them to school. You have that pleasure as well. And I'm sorry, but we're not going to hold up a building when when everything is telling us that this building needs to close,
Right.
because a handful of parents don't want to have their kids on the bus for 20 extra minutes. I'm sorry. And maybe that's insensitive, but it's just real. Take the emotion out of it and be real.
So I don't know if you can do the math on this. We got 3 minutes, but I don't know if you can do the math on this. But let's just say hypothetically we close 3 schools. What does that do for the capacity of these schools that are at 50%? Does it push them up to 55? Does it push them to 60? Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
So we still got 40, 45% empty capacity in these schools. I mean, we need to close more than 4 if that's the case. And we look at what happened with homeschool. 1/3 of the students are now being homeschooled, alternative school, pod learning, Montessori's, whatever it is, whatever you want to throw in there. People are exiting the system for a reason, and nobody seems to be wanting to hear that.
Yeah. Well, and when you say well, there's other reasons too. That's what people will try to bring up this whole social, emotional side of schools these days are why people are pulling out. The things that parents don't want their kids learning that they want to teach their kids themselves. They don't want you to have a hand in all the sex ed and the LGBTQ stuff. They want to do that at home. They
Right.
want to teach their kids the way they want to teach them. We need to worry about reading, writing, and the fact that our kids can't read and write.
Note to self, maybe you should, focus on your core business model of what you got going on there. All right, we're down to the last 90 seconds here. Melissa, final thoughts on the Prop A and everything else. Your final thoughts for the day.
I just encourage greatly, if anybody in Fairbanks is out there, if you've not voted, please go out and vote. I have voted no against Prop A. I encourage you to do the same. The borough has the money. They can tell the district that they can give us something right now. This can wait until October. It should have waited until October. So please get out and vote. Vote no.
Melissa, we should probably have you on more often to talk about some of these issues, because it's refreshing to hear. I mean, somebody who is obviously pro-education. You
Yeah.
want the teachers to be paid. You want them to get a good salary. You want to do all this stuff, but at the same time, also understand that there's a balance there.
Yes.
And I think that's the problem, is that nobody wants to look for the balance. It's like they want to give them everything, and then when they want more, they're like, okay, we'll just give you whatever you want. And again, the emotion of this is just, it's astonishing to me. So
Yeah.
anyway, Melissa Burnett, thank you so much for coming on board and joining us this morning. We appreciate you being part of it. Hold the line for just a second. Okay, folks, we got more coming up. The Michael Duke Show continues. In hour 2 of the program this morning, we're going to be talking with State Senator Robb Myers. We're going to talk about the budgets. We're going to talk about the last couple weeks of session, and I'm sure we'll actually talk about Prop A as well, since that's in Rob's bailiwick. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Rob's in the green room too as well. I could see both of you in there together. But Melissa, I just got to say that it is still astonishing to me that people are so willfully blind to the problem of leaving all these schools open and operating just because it's my closest school, or it's the school that we bought our house because there was a school just down the corner or whatever, understanding that things change, and yet nobody is willing to look at this monetarily and say, can we afford to do that? It's like,
Absolutely right.
It's like it's all fine as long as my school is okay, everything just fine, right? I mean, that's what we're looking at.
Yep. And it's all about me. And it's not about the rest of the district, the rest of the students. It's all about you affected my kids. And it's incredibly selfish. And people just need to take a step back, take a deep breath, realize this is not emotional. These school closures are something that have to happen. And, so that's why we're strategic planning and involving the community in it. And so that maybe they can get a little wake up call and see that this isn't about money. This isn't about hating your schools.
But the problem is the school board and the administration, portions of the administration at least, are all about, they're ignoring it. They're ignoring the fact and they bring it back like Jim, what's his face? Jim Anderson down in Anchorage said, oh, well, we said it was a budget problem, but we should never have said that. We should never have started that conversation. It's not a budget problem. It's an enrollment problem. And again, surprising that they said it out loud, and Jarrett Bryant actually reiterated that, shockingly. But I mean, nobody in the Fairbanks, school board or district is saying that this is an enrollment problem. They keep coming back to, if only we had more money.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that brings me back to something David Boyle actually said a little bit ago. I was trying to keep it up at the top of my screen and it just kind of got lost. David, I don't know how I do it. I don't know how I'm still sane. I'm trying. It's very hard being the only me. So, if anybody out there wants to run for school board in the fall in Fairbanks, I could use a hand.
Yeah, no, it would be nice. And of course, we saw people attempt to do that, but we saw the voting, the vote. We saw what happened with the vote, where a more liberal or progressive cadre was put on the school board, on the assembly. And I know it swings back and forth, but at some point, somebody's got to have some realistic options and real, kind of truth talk about this is what we're facing. It's not a budget problem. It is strictly a enrollment issue, number of students, and we just can't keep being all things to all people.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's complicated, it's hard, but I'll run again. I'm going to do another 3. So, I've got after this election, it's my turn. So, I'm going to stay.
Oh, man. Yeah. I did too and done. I was like, nope, I'm going to only bash my head against that wall so many times before I'm like, I am peace out. You guys have to deal with this yourself. In fact, I was so frustrated. I left the community. I'm like, I'm out of here. I am out of here.
We miss you, Michael.
All right. Well, Melissa, thank you so much for coming on board, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
All right. Melissa Burnett, our guest here on the program. I see that Robb Myers is with us here. Hello, my friend. How are you doing?
Oh, we're doing all right, Michael. We're caffeinated and ready to go.
Caffeinated and ready. Let me bring your microphone down just a little bit. You're loud and proud this morning, and we'll make you go. So you got your notes in front of you. You're all ready. Everything's good.
Fired up, ready to go here.
All right, good. All right. So Robb Myers is good. We've got him. We're going to put him back in the green room now. He can eat all those donuts and coffee and be ready to go. All right. Well, yes. What a hot mess this morning. I apologize. I was in such a hurry to get started this morning. I forgot to do my little secret thing that turns down anyway. I forgot, and I apologize for not putting all that in, and the somebody said it was like listening to Max Headroom this morning. I apologize. I apologized. So we're going to be. Let me see. And what could be another. I'm sorry. I'm reading this. Brian, what does this mean? It sounds like it's lyrics or something. I'd unravel every riddle for my individual in pain, trouble, or pain with thoughts you all be thinking you could be another Lincoln if you only had a brain. I don't know what that is, but it is what it is. Yeah. Fairbanks is gone. A walrus was a bridge too far for the loon, says Fat Ray. That was the walrus in the parade. Remember that? All right. That's the Scarecrow in the Wizard of Oz. Okay. All right. Oh, I suppose it is. If you only had a brain, that would be the Wizard of Oz. Thank you so much for throwing that out there. Thanks for the refreshing, honest conversation, Melissa. Yep, I think that was good stuff. And let's see, Fairbanks School District's literally keeping things from parents. Are you shocked? Are you surprised? David, Fairbanks needs to start reproducing very quickly to save the schools. Yes. Yes, they do. They need to start right now. All right. You can't continue to keep schools open at half capacity. School districts, hold my beer. Yeah, we'll see how that works. All right, hour 2 dead ahead. Robb Myers, our guest, The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
Buddy, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Yep, live around the world on the interwebs at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning and welcome to it, hour 2 of the big radio show. And we are ready to go. Just finished up with Melissa Burnett, Fairbanks School Board member, talking about Prop A up in Fairbanks. If you're just joining us, we here on the program, that's the royal we, recommend that you vote no. Vote once for me, will you? Because I still own property in Fairbanks, but I can't vote. So while you're there, vote once for me, will you? Vote no against Prop A. Melissa came on board and told us all exactly why. It was an eye-opening conversation. Let's just put it that way. Eye-opening conversation. Let's continue on, though. We're going to move the needle a little bit here, moving on to state stuff. Joining us this morning to discuss many different things, including the final days of the session and everything else, is our friend, State Senator Robb Myers, Senator from District Q. Is that right? Q up in the interior? It was B, now it's Q. Robb Myers joins us to discuss wood ticks, lunatics, and politics. Hello, my friend. How are you doing?
Well, 2 out of 3 ain't bad, right?
I know,
So.
exactly. I mean, wood ticks and lunatics. That's what we got to talk about today. Rob is coming on board today to talk with us about the budget. And he's also, we're going to talk about the budget, the process, the last couple weeks of session, and then we'll spend a little bit of time in the final segment talking about Prop A and Fairbanks because that's his backyard and his bailiwick. So why not do it? So good morning, Rob. How are things going for you?
I got a week and a half to go. I am, watching the bills as everything is speeding up around here, and also watching my fridge, trying to shrink it down, make sure that the food and the end of my time here hit, right about the same amount of time there.
You'll open it up and there'll be a food bar in the fridge. That'll be the last thing as you go, a protein bar on your way out the door. Well, that's good. That's good. And that's got to feel good in some ways, I'm sure. But let's start. Let's talk about how things went down here. So the Senate took the budget to the floor last week. And there was a lot of stuff going on. I had to laugh because all the amendments to the budget were from the minority, the unofficial minority, because you guys couldn't officially be an official minority. And yet it was just riddled full of bullet holes. I mean, every time you guys would try and bring something up, and I was watching some of this go on, and I was just shaking my head, some of the things. So let's talk a little bit about the budget on the floor and the things that you guys did to try and bring down the size and scope of government. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, so operating budget was on the floor on Wednesday. Surprising part, you're right that the minority had all the amendments. Usually the majority has a few. You got a few kind of cleanup things. They realized they passed it out of finance, they missed something, or you had some late breaking development, and they put a couple 3 amendments on the floor. And I'd heard that they were going to, but nothing popped up. So all of it was coming from me and Mike and Shelley. I'm going to run through some of my amendments, and I'll talk about Mike's and Shelley's too, in no particular order. So one big one I did was removing the inflation proofing. So this is in statute. It's been there since the early 80s. Every year you take part of the earnings and throw it into the corpus of the fund to compensate for inflation.
Right.
Nothing out of the ordinary. We've been doing it for 40 odd years. But the thing is that you saw some stories coming out near the end of the session last year in the Beacon and a couple other places saying that, hey, at the rate that we're going, it's entirely possible that within a couple, 3 years here, the earnings reserve account, the part that's spendable, we're going to be out of easily spendable cash. There will still be stuff in there to spend, but in order to spend it, we will have to sell things. And when you sell things quickly because you have to spend the cash, that usually means that you sell them at a discount in order to sell them quickly. So we're going to lose money along the way.
Right. Liquidity in the account. Right.
Correct. There's a difference between the balance in the account and the actual liquidity in the account. So I said, well, hold off a minute here. Let's not do the inflation proofing for a couple of reasons. One, because we wrote a couple of huge checks in 2019 and 2022 from the earnings reserve over to the corpus for a total of
$8 billion, right? Yeah,
exactly.
$8 billion worth. Yeah,
exactly. And we're I think something like half or 2/3 of the way through the first check. We haven't even hit the second check yet. So I said, let's hold off on that. That was in effect future inflation proofing. Let's hold off on that. And second, when we put the inflation proofing statutes in back in the early 80s, we were also really clamping down on what the permanent fund was allowed to invest in. They were only allowed to invest in bonds, basically. And when you have bonds, yes, inflation is a huge issue. But these days, we allow them to invest in almost everything. Bonds, stocks, private equity, real estate, the whole 9 yards. And for most of that stuff, the value of it keeps up with the inflation. So in effect, we're already inflation proofed. And then we've changed how we do our draw from the fund. Instead of doing the statutory net income, which is subject to inflation, we're doing the percent of market value, which in effect is not. So it's like, yeah, we have this inflation proofing stuff, but do we really need it? And, I'm bringing up the things that the Permanent Foreign Corporation Board has been telling us for the last year, and that got shot down. I think we got 3 votes, maybe 4 votes on that.
Right. So I mean, and part of the reason behind this is because what we're seeing is the underpinnings of a crisis, right? They're like setting up a crisis to then justify major changes to the permanent fund itself, because they're saying, oh, well, we need to roll the earnings reserve into the corpus and that would prevent the inflation proofing, blah, blah, blah. But the problem is you've created the crisis. You put $8 billion into the fund that didn't need to go in there, that you're not going to count it as inflation proofing. You're going to say you still need the inflation proofing, even though you don't need the inflation proofing anymore. And you're going to pour more money in there to make the fund illiquid on your own and then justify your position. I mean, you could see it happening.
Exactly.
And nobody's crying, whoa, this is wrong. And you do, and yet it's 17-3, 16-4, whatever it is. Nobody votes for it because they want the crisis to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And you can tell this has been going on for a while, because during that first check, that first $4 billion was written back in 2019. Initially, the legislature passed $12 billion and the governor cut it down to $4 billion. So, and now you're right. This is exactly what we're going to do. It is, this is part of what's been talked about for the last year or so, is once we get to the point where we don't have the money in the earnings reserve easily available, then people are going to say, oh, well, we need to pass a constitutional amendment to roll the earnings reserve and the corpus together so that and codify the 5% draw. So, we can see the push that is coming here. And I mean, I don't know if this is something that meets decorum rules on the floor of the Senate to say, but if it comes to that point, I'm going to be standing up and saying, I told you so. Because we can see the handwriting on the wall here. We see the pattern. We see what's coming.
Yeah, we could see it coming. This is not a big shocking thing. We've been telling you about it for years, which leads me again to believe that this is working as intended. That's exactly what I'm starting to believe. All right, let's move on to the next amendment.
Yeah, so I had another one a little bit smaller in scope. You just had Melissa on talking about school closures up in the Fairbanks area. We're looking at closing Eielson for right now. You just had Anchorage come out and say that they're going to be closing 5 schools over the next few years. Juneau is closing a couple of schools. And then throw in all of the uncertainty on the correspondence school side, what's going on with that. And so we've been kind of receiving some reports that there might be more people around the state interested in starting up some charter schools as an alternative. And hey, apparently we're going to have some buildings available, it sounds like. I had talked to the executive branch and talked to Department of Education and heard that they were interested in putting together kind of some charter school coordination. They would do a person to help get applications ready. They would do some grants to try to get buildings together to get stuff going a little quicker than usual. And so I said, well, let's do an amendment, keep it budget neutral. Let's put $2 million into this charter school coordination thing. May not use all of it. We'll see. But we're going to take that $2 million out of what is currently in the budget for education on ranked choice voting to educate the voters on how RCV works. And I said, well, look, guys, we've already done this RCV thing a couple of times. A couple of the polls that came out said just about everybody understands it already anyway. And oh yeah, by the way, also the polls are telling us that there's a pretty good chance that RCV is going away come November.
Right.
So why do we need to educate people on something that is going away? And that got shot down.
Of course it did. Of course it did. Then my favorite topic, which of course is what I like to call the ghost positions. The PCNs, that is the number of positions that are funded but not filled, meaning that that's a department. It has supposed to have 12 employees. They only have 10 or 8, but they're receiving funding for that full 12, and they're doing things with it. Finally, you step forward to say, okay, let's talk about this. And you had a couple of amendments. Tell me about them.
Yeah, we took 2 stabs at this. So the first one, it would have eliminated all of the funded but unfilled positions that have been empty since January 1 of 2023.
Last year.
So these are positions that have been unfilled for a year and 4 months, year and 5 months, whatever. And now we even made a few exceptions there. So for example, the Division of Forestry over in DNR had some of their firefighter positions that were empty last summer. These are seasonal positions, and they're budgeted for, I forget what the full number is. They didn't quite fill all of them last year. I'm not going to bust you for not filling a position that's only open for 6 months anyway, right? Okay, so we took those out. DOT has been begging us have been really scraping the bottom of the barrel trying to find mechanics. We took out the open mechanic positions because we know they're actively recruiting. We know that they're scrambling for these things. 1 or 2 other pieces like that where it's like, okay, we know that we probably shouldn't be cutting this specifically. So we took a look at the rest of it. We said, all right, we've got 501 positions that we were cutting with that amendment for a total savings of $52.6 million. And that got shot down. It was interesting the way it got shot down because we kind of had 2 different stories going. One story was, oh, well, these things don't exist. We've already scrubbed all of the empty positions that we need to. So this isn't an issue. I'm like, well, I've got the spreadsheet from OMB with all the PCNs on it and stuff. So no, they do exist. And second of all, I had another response that said, well, they still use this money. They use it for good things. They use it for grants. They use it for overtime. One department came to us and said they used it to upgrade their technology. So it's going to make things better and more efficient in the long run. And I look at that and I say, well, that's great. I don't have a problem with any of that per se. But the problem is that the departments need to be coming to us as the legislature, as the appropriating branch, to tell us, what are you spending your money on? Because that is our role.
Right.
You shouldn't be having this slush fund and then having it available to spend on whatever the heck you want to spend it on.
Right. It's subject to appropriation, right? I mean, this was money that was appropriated for personnel. Doesn't mean you should be able to use it to buy coffee cups for the water cooler or whatever. I mean, that doesn't, as much as the good things you're spending on, if it's a good thing, the legislature will fund it, right?
Right.
So
Exactly.
$52 million. No, they riddled you full of bullets. Sorry, can't do that. So you took another bite at the apple quickly here.
I took another shot at it. I said, all right, how about every position that has been open since January 1 of 2020? So pre-COVID, empty positions. We got 43 positions. If you haven't filled a position in 4 years, what makes you think you're going to fill it anytime in the near future? All right. $4.3 million. Not a ton, but hey, at least it's something that got shot down. So
Right, it's a start. And then I want to get real quick to so I'm running out of time. Quickly run through Shelley and Mike's propositions here, their amendments.
yeah, so Shelley had some interesting ones. These were all kind of ads, but these were all stuff that the governor had put in his initial budget and the Senate pulled out. And I'll caveat that by saying that the Senate budget is already larger than the governor's budget anyway. So if they pulled these out, what did they add in instead? She did 3 different amendments. One was to add in 2 prosecutors to Department of Law to help prosecute sexual assault, sex trafficking type cases. She was trying to fund 2 clerical positions that would have been dedicated to work on grand jury stuff. And then one way that the Department of Law recruits is they pull in interns, guys straight out of law school. They intern with them. They give them a stipend. Well, the Senate cut half of the stipend. So the governor asked for enough money to fund stipends for 58 interns. The Senate cut that down in half, down to 29. Shelley was trying to put that back in there. Each of these ads are all of $500,000 a piece. But if you can't fund your prosecutors and just your basic criminal justice stuff, I mean, what's the point of having a government, in my mind?
Exactly. And that we'll get to Mike's here on the other side. I'm up against the break, so let's hold on here just a second. We'll do Mike's, and then we'll talk about the budget as a whole. State Senator Robb Myers is our guest. The Michael Duke Show continues. Empty positions for 4 years. We can't cut those. They don't exist. I mean, it's money well spent. I mean, all right, we'll continue. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
I mean, this kills me, Rob. So, I mean, and I know I was watching it, so I know it was Bert Stedman who said, "Oh, these don't exist." What do you mean they don't exist? I'm looking at the spreadsheet with the positions and the money's going into them. If they didn't exist, the money would not be flowing to those departments. We're talking about $50 million for 500. That's $103,000 a piece, by the way, for each one of those. If you average it out over all those positions, and you're just saying they just don't exist, 500 positions just don't exist. Well, where's the money? Where's the $52 million going then if they don't exist? How could you even in your own mind justify a comment like that? I mean, my eyeballs almost shot out of my head when I saw that.
I know. I'm sitting here going, what do you mean they don't exist? This is what OMB told me. This is what Ledge Finance told me. All of the people that are advising us on how the budget works says these exist. They even told us that we'll get into this with Mike's stuff, but Mike was going after not trying to get rid of the empty positions themselves, but trying to do something with the leftover money from the positions from last year that were funded, but we haven't expended the money yet because they're unfilled positions. So, and Ledge Finance is telling us we're looking at roughly $80 to $90 million of lapse, just money that we allocated to those positions that are not being spent.
Yeah. But it doesn't matter. They're all there. Or the money, or the other hand, Josephson was like, oh, the money's being spent on good things. Wait a minute. Good things? I mean, if they're
tell me what those good things are.
Yeah, if they are good things, bring it to the legislature since they're the appropriating body and have them appropriate. If it's good enough, it is justified. You guys will say okay. But just to say it's good things, you're leaving all that money in the hands of these bureaucrats to decide what's good and what's not. That's not their job. That's not what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, this is how we're set up. This is the balance of power between the legislative and executive branch. The executive branch goes out and does things. We tell them how much money they're allowed to spend.
Right. And we're not talking about a huge amount of money. By the time this is all said and done, between removing inflation proofing, charter school coordination, which would have cost a little bit of money, but it was really a transfer. Another 50 million, then 4 million. I mean, you're only talking about, maybe $100 million by the time this is all said and done. If they had said yes to all the amendments, I mean, and yet they all said no. We can't cut another thing. We can increase what we want, but we can't cut another thing. It's just and again, for somebody like Bert Stedman to say, well, these just don't exist. This is the same guy that told us we couldn't possibly cut another thing. And yet when presented with it, he's like, nope, they don't exist. I mean, that's madness, dude. That's just total madness. What do you mean they don't exist? Okay, I guess we don't have to expend the money then if they don't exist. Oh, no, wait, you still want the money in there? Well, then something exists. How could you even say that?
I know this is it's crazy. What was going on the floor, and it's like I've got Ledge Finance and OMB and departments telling me one thing, and then I'm hearing another thing on the floor, and I'm going, okay, we've got a disconnect here somewhere. Y'all need to get together, and at this point, I'm inclined to believe Ledge Finance and OMB over most anything else.
Yeah. No, I mean, to me, it just shows one thing. They have no interest in actually cutting the size and scope of government. They're there. It's a protectionism unit. That's what it's about. It's about protecting the current spend or what they see as the ideal spend from their perspective. Nothing else matters at this point. And they're going to do anything that they can do to protect that government spend on the other side. Again, proving once more that the disconnect between the public and the private economy is real.
Yeah, and we'll get to that. How much do we want to spend in the last segment when we're talking about tax caps and everything too?
Yeah, exactly. All right, 30 seconds out. Robb Myers is our guest, State Senator, District Q, up in the interior. We're going to continue with him, and does not exist. I couldn't believe it when I watched it, and I'm still a little bit just aghast about how somebody can justify that. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all the stuff.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
Well, there's a pinch in there somewhere. I mean, at least I don't say that stuff just doesn't exist when obviously it does exist. I mean, it's just willful blindness. Or working as intended. That also could, Robb Myers is our guest. Robb, quickly, let's finish up with the amendments. You had Mike Shower's amendments before we move on to the budget as a whole. He was also working on some things regarding PCNs and other things. So what were Mike Shower's amendments and what happened?
So Mike had 3 different amendments that were also addressing these empty positions. Rather than going after the positions themselves, he was going after the money that were in those positions this current year, that is left over because they didn't spend it because those positions are empty. Ledge Finance is telling us we're looking at a lapse of something between 80 and 90 million by the time we get to the end of the fiscal year on June 30. So Mike said, oh, great. All right, we're going to take some of that money, not even all of it. We're going to take some of that money. He was looking at 45 million and said, well, let's use some of that 45 million to offset the BSA increase, because we've got the one-time funding in there of 175 million to raise the BSA this year. And so let's offset 45 of that. So that's 45 million in general funds we don't have to spend. And that got shot down. And then Mike said, well, let's throw it in the CBR. And that got shot down. And then he said, well, let's throw that into the PFD. And that got shot down. It's like we got money left over that we're trying to use to offset things. And we can't do that. What the heck here, guys? So kind of left that one in the dust. He had some intent language to throw in on the broadband grants, that bill we passed, a month and a half ago or something now.
Right.
To just say, look, when you go spend this money, your first consideration on handing out the grants is going to be price. If you can get the service for a cheaper price, you need to do that. And that got shot down because, of course, we can't, actually, try to price compare. That apparently government doesn't do that or something.
Right.
And then finally, had a couple of amendments having to do with the PFD. We tried to do a 50-50 PFD. That was an interesting one because if you go back and watch the vote, a couple of the folks that have said in the past that they're pro PFD voted against it. I think we only got five or six votes on the 50-50 PFD. And then Mike tried to just say, all right, well, as of right now, what is currently unallocated, and I guess that's changed since then because of some stuff the House has been doing. What was unallocated at that point, which was a little under $200 million, just shove the rest of it, all of the leftovers, to the PFD, and that got shot down. I think the most we got on these amendments was 6 votes on any of them. So, I mean, that's where you go.
In a body that's has a majority of Republicans, you could only get 6 votes in all of that. That speaks volumes right there. All right, well, let's talk about the budget as a whole. Supposedly a balanced budget, but is it really?
Supposedly, yeah. You know, we've been talking about balanced budget since last year. We talked about the importance of a balanced budget this year. You know, you're hearing that out of the majority, you know, all the time and stuff. They admitted on the floor that as of right now, we're currently in the hole by about $6 million, you know, out of a little over $6 billion UGF budget. So, you know, 0.1%. They'll work that out in conference committee. That's not the end of the world. We are, however, still waiting on some labor contracts that are out to being negotiated. So that those may come in, that might change. And some of those labor contracts, you know, this is part of that, you know, 125 million a year. The budget goes up every year that you talk about a lot. Labor contracts is a lot of that expense. So that could potentially shoot us up another $25-50 million. We'll have to see. There's 4 unions currently negotiating with the state. So that's a big one that's still kind of outstanding. So Ledge Finance last week. So we passed the budget in the Senate on Wednesday. Wednesday night, Ledge Finance was over in House Ways and Means testifying on the budget and the projections moving forward and stuff. And what they said is that we have set ourselves up for a significant deficit next year. We're looking at a deficit, something in the neighborhood of $187 million. So and that's assuming we just take this year's budgets and adjust them by 2.5% for inflation. That's right. That's all that Ledge Finance did. And so what that would mean is we'd have to either do one of two things. Either A, what we currently have set for capital budget for this year, we'd have to almost cut that in half for next year. Or B, we could reduce the PFD yet again, and instead of being 25% of the POMV draw going to the dividend, we'd be something in the neighborhood of 11% of the POMV draw going to the dividend, which would make for a check of something in the neighborhood of $600 a person.
Right.
So,
again, not that I told you so, but
yeah, exactly. And at the rate we're going, you know, just projecting it out with our projected revenues, and again, only increasing the budget by 2.5% for inflation, which I wonder if that's a little bit low. By fiscal year of 2030, we could wipe out the entire capital budget and still have to cut the PFD in order to balance the budget. So, I mean, this is all kinds of screwed up. And, you know, then we get into, you know, some points I was making in my speech on the budget is the point of a balanced budget. There's 2 reasons. One is to make the budget sustainable. And 2, it helps your economy because it signals some stability to private industry so that they can come in and kind of know the ground rules of what they're getting into when they're going to invest in an area. Okay. So on the one hand, we're not sustainable because we're still dependent on some very highly variable incomes with the stock market and oil. And, you know, we were just talking about how we're setting ourselves up for deficit for the next few years. And in my mind, it doesn't help private industry either because we're signaling to them that we're going to spend every dollar as it comes in. So the question is, if oil drops or the stock market drops, who's the next revenue target when we hit that drop?
Right, because they'll be looking to find the money somewhere, and it could be private industry, it could be a tax on some other industry, it could be an increase in a tax on a certain industry, or it could be revenue from the people as a whole, which is what we've been saying for years on this program, is that once they consume all of that, they'll come back to you hat in hand. Well, not hat in hand. They'll come back to you and jam their hands into your pocket and say, "You don't need that. Let me take that from you."
Exactly. And the interesting part is that up until this point in time, the rhetoric has really been talking about setting it up as the PFD versus the operating budget. Oh, well, we have to cut the PFD because we can't cut the operating budget. The interesting thing is that looking at the structure of it now, the rhetoric is probably going to change. The numbers have changed so that we're effectively setting it up as the PFD versus the capital budget now. Now, it's a lot easier to cut the capital budget than it is to cut the operating budget. We've done that over the years. The capital budget has varied wildly over the last 15 years. It, as high as $1 billion, as low as 100 million. But in setting those two up, again, the capital budget is another place where, as we've talked in the past, you have a lot of employees, you have a lot of businesses that are dependent on that capital budget spending, and they're going to be lobbying for that spending again.
Right.
So, we're setting ourselves up with the PFD versus the budget again. In my opinion, the way this budget is set up, both the capital and the operating, is it is set up to maximize the public economy and minimize the private economy. So one example that I know you've talked about a lot. It's not a large amount in terms of dollar figures, but in my mind, it just encapsulates this whole problem. Is we've been talking about the childcare crisis and fixing childcare, things like that. And childcare is a crisis across most of the country. I don't dispute that. But the way that we're going about it here is we're not fixing childcare, we're just subsidizing it. And we're setting it up so that the subsidy is going to be in perpetuity. I think Brad was talking about this a little bit last week, where they took the waterfall provision that said, oh, okay, if we have money left over, it'll go out as an energy relief type check.
Right.
And they modified that. And, what that's telling the people, what that's telling the private economy is, it says, we already knew that the legislature won't always follow our own laws. We'll use the budget to override our laws. Now we're going to override our own budgets. You can't even trust that anymore.
Right. And so what Brad was talking about was that when they put that waterfall provision in that said any excess will then flow down into the PFD the following year, well, then they rejiggered how they factored what was excess. Right. They rejiggered what the expenses were. So instead of being about, I don't know, I'll pick a number, $100 million in excess, they said, well, yes, it was $100 million, but see, we're going to account for this, this, and this. So now it's only $50 million. They rejiggered the way that they figured it, not based on how it was when they passed the law, but on how they see it now to capture more of that money.
Exactly. They put a cap on it, and so now they've got more money to spend. And so, you get to the end of this, and I look at it and I say, this is a budget that is designed to serve the government and its ends. It is not designed to serve the people and their welfare at the end of it.
Yeah, no. And of course, that leads us to the final conclusion, which is basically, again, that disconnect between the public and the private, and the budget is set to serve who?
Exactly. And, this is something we've talked about a lot. I've gone back to a lot over the last few years. Is in the end, the things that a government does the government should be the servant of the people, of taking care of things that people can't take care of themselves or have a really hard time taking care of themselves. And instead, government has effectively been set on autopilot, and it exists for its own ends now. And we have to keep the government going because that's where people get jobs, and that's just all kinds of backwards.
When the government, when the budget is set to serve the government and not the people, that's where we're at today. It's serving the government, like you said, because, the government provides jobs. The government is the economy. That's what these people have said. The government is the economy, not the private economy, not everything else. Now, maybe that'll change down the road when they start taxing everybody and they're going to have to look to the economy. But by that time, it'll be too little, too late, in my opinion. Final thoughts on this segment here.
Yeah, it goes back to what we've talked about a lot is, and I've been doing some special orders on the floor this year about it, is that we've spent the last 40 odd years handicapping our economy because we don't let the oil royalties flow out to the people. And we just let this trickle out through the PFD. And then once the PFD got large enough, all of a sudden, now the government wants that stream too. So we're doing everything we can to hinder the private economy and prevent the economy from diversifying, from having the capital to invest. And now we have to replace that because we need the government to spend to create the economy, and that's going to fall apart.
It's not sustainable, as we like to say around here. Robb Myers is our guest, State Senator District Q. We're going to continue with him here in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, Robb Myers, our guest in the thing here.
Real quick, Mike, let me just hi, honey. I know you and the kids are watching on YouTube.
Everybody's at home watching this morning. Wave hi. Everybody say hi to Dad. It's all from Brian says, but that's a problem for next year's clown posse. I mean, that's the thing. This is what we were just talking about with Melissa, right? Oh, well, that's a problem. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Well, the thing is, you can see the bridge from here. You know you're going to cross it shortly. So you're going to create more problems for yourself now by saying, oh, we'll just worry about that later. Are you out of your mind?
I was having a conversation. I was having a conversation with another senator last year, and we were talking about the oil taxes, and there's a bill to up oil taxes. Hasn't gone anywhere in a while, but I told him, I said, hey, look at the fiscal note at this. You look at the what our budget is doing, and you can tell this thing's only going to really do much for us for like another 3 or 4 years, and then we're back in the same boat. And he said, well, yeah, but that's for you to deal with. I won't be here anymore. I'm going, excuse me? That's the attitude that we're going with around here?
Yeah, I'll be retired. I'll be taking my big 3 years of retirement out of the legislature, and I'll be going living somewhere else, that's cheaper to live and everything. How many times have we seen that? How many times have we seen legislators who go through it? They make an occupation of being part of the legislature for 10, 15, 20 years. And then when it's all said and done, they take everything and they go plonk it down somewhere else, Tennessee or someplace where they can live for pennies on the dollar, compared to Alaska. I mean, not surprising. It's somebody else's problem. I got my golden parachute. Where's yours?
Yeah, and this is a problem across the board in government is, I think the legislature in particular is, we look at things on a 1-year budget cycle, a 2-year election cycle, maybe a 4-year election cycle if you're talking about the Senate and the governor. But, we have to be thinking 10, 20, 30 years down the road to set ourselves up for, good processes and things like that. Not set ourselves up for, hey, as long as I'm in power, then, life is golden here. So, this is the incentives that governments and election cycles and things like that set up for us, unfortunately. And it's not good.
Well, and it's hard when you look at people and they just say, well, that problem really doesn't exist, but it's right here on paper. It exists. You could see it. What are you talking about? And like you said, now we've created this dependency on government at every levels. You start talking about cutting out the capital budget and making it a PFD versus capital budget fight. And you got all these, construction companies and everything else that are just, they're going to spend millions of dollars telling you that you don't need your PFD. They need your PFD. Because they need that infrastructure money. They built their whole business model around government largesse, and they can't survive without the big, juicy government contracts. Doesn't matter if we survive or not. As long as government survives, as long as the economy is living to serve the government, everything's gravy. If it doesn't live to serve the government, it's a problem.
Right. And at the rate that we're going, what we're setting ourselves up for is you're going to have federal spending, you're going to have state spending, and keep in mind, a lot of municipal spending comes from the state. And, with their employees, their contractors, and then you're going to have a small service sector of, guys with restaurants and auto mechanics and stuff that make their living off of those government employees, serve the government sector in effect. And that's all you're going to have left in the end. That's what we're setting ourselves up for.
And again, the fact that Ledge Finance is saying, by the way, you've created a huge deficit for the coming years, and that's only basing it on a 2% inflationary spike, which we know is, I mean, tell me another story, Grandpa. That is, it's insane. It really is. I keep using that word today, but it doesn't get much crazier than the belief that somehow if you ignore it, it will go away, and we can just pretend that it doesn't exist.
Yeah, that 2.5% that they're using as an inflation adjustment, in my mind, that's still pretty low because we effectively haven't adjusted for inflation over the last few years, because at the same time that inflation was skyrocketing, oil prices were in the tank. And so we're already sitting here we're not looking at the inflationary pressures right now that are coming next year. We're still dealing with the inflationary pressures from the last 2 to 3 years. So I look at that 2.5% and I go, that's probably, even if inflation is actually 2.5% over the next couple of years, I'd say that that's probably a pretty low growth factor for our budget around here.
Don't worry, you can cross that bridge when you come to it. It'll be fine. It'll all work out fine. Don't worry about it. Hold my beer. Let's shovel some more coal into this box and see if we can get her up to speed. If we can get her up to 88 miles an hour, we can go back to the future. It'll be fine. All right.
That's one way to avoid the bridge. You hit 88 miles an hour, right?
Exactly.
We watch that movie.
Yeah, we just go back and watch it. Hoverboards. Where are my hoverboards? That's what I want to know. All right, Robb Myers, our guest. One final segment here as we go through. Let's get back to it. The Michael Duke Show. Please like and share. We got a bunch of people in the chat room today. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do it all. Here we go. Okay, one final big segment here. We're going to continue. Robb Myers is our guest. We've been talking about the budgets and the insanity that's going on in Juneau. I can't use that word enough today, quite honestly. But let's move back up to Fairbanks. We were talking with Melissa Burnett earlier in hour one about the tax cap and what's going on with the special election up there. She was urging everyone to vote no. I would urge everyone to vote no. But Robb, you've got a perspective on this. So tell me a little bit about, what the tax cap election, what it means for tax and spending caps in the future.
Yeah, so what's going on up in Fairbanks, I think, is a great illustration of what to expect out of tax caps and spending caps in general. I think it really illuminates what would happen with a spending cap at the state level as well. So the tax cap has been in place in Fairbanks, I think, since 1987. We reenact it every 2 years because of the 2-year, the ballot initiative language in the Constitution saying you can't change it for 2 years, but after that, they're welcome to. So we reenact it to make sure that it stays in place. It doesn't get messed with. Been doing that for close to 40 years now. Been working out well. You know more details about that than I do. And it's interesting to me that they're trying to take a run at this spending cap, at this tax cap, during a high inflation and high property assessment period. You've still got property up there. I'd like to know what kind of percentage your property value has gone up by. Mine's gone up by, I think, about 40-50% in the last, about 5-6 years. So while the mill rate has technically been going down the last 3 years, the actual amount of tax collected has been going up significantly still because of those higher valuations. And I think what's going on with this tax cap debate is really illustrative of a lot of things. And a big one is that tax caps and spending caps are great for stopping short-term spending run-ups. you go, oh, well, we've got a boom this year. Well, that tax cap is going to keep us from just, spending hog wild unsustainably. It'll make us put some of it into savings so that when it inevitably drops back down next year, we didn't do anything crazy along the way. That's great. The problem is that a tax cap or a spending cap doesn't curb the long-term appetite for spending. And that's what's going on in Fairbanks. Is the problem is we have elected an assembly and a school board that are reflecting an appetite, a want to spend more. And if you have a tax cap and a spending cap in place, that's great. But if the appetite for spending is large enough, they will try to override it. And this is not the only instance of that. Kind of your poster child of that is Colorado. Colorado put in the TABOR, the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights, back in '92. Worked great for a little over a decade. And then the appetite to spend, as Colorado shifted blue, the appetite to spend got large enough that they modified their spending cap back in 2006 to allow them to spend more money. And that's effectively what's going on here. We have an appetite to spend more, and your tax cap doesn't solve that. So I'm all in favor of a spending cap. I introduced one. The Chamber of Commerce has come out in favor of a spending cap. You're seeing the concept of a spending cap going around. But what I'm trying to tell people is that a spending cap by itself is not a long-term solution. It's great to fix short-term problems or to prevent short-term problems, but it doesn't fix your problem in the long term, because the long-term problem is your appetite of how much do you want to spend.
This is, and I've been saying this for 25 years. I'm a broken record, but the question has always been, put to the public as if we have a revenue problem. And the problem is that it's never been a revenue problem. It's always been a spending problem up until the last 5 or 6 years, when it's gone from being just a spending problem to now both a revenue and spending problem. I mean, they always phrased it. They always couched the argument as if it was a revenue problem. If only we had more revenue, we could do all this. But no, it was the appetite for spending. They always wanted to spend more. And as somebody else said earlier, if you want to spend every dollar, well, you said it earlier, if you spend every dollar that's there, how can anybody find stability? If all you're doing is signaling that you're going to spend every dollar that comes into your gate, how is that going to fix anything? I mean, that was always been my argument with Brad. Okay, great. We have a flat tax. What's going to happen then? They'll spend every dollar of it and more. There's no guarantee that the PFD will be paid, even with a flat tax, because they never saw a dollar that they didn't want to spend.
Right. And as you've mentioned a few times before, I know, your spending problem creates your revenue problem. It's the guy that goes out and gets the hugely unsustainable mortgage, that kind of like what we saw back in the mid 2000s. Some guy goes out and says, oh, I got this mortgage and the terms look great for the first 2 years, and after that I'll just renegotiate the terms, and all of a sudden the bottom falls out of the market and you can't renegotiate the terms anymore. Now you're screwed. Your spending problem created your revenue problem. And until we address that spending problem, we address that spending appetite. That isn't even necessarily a politician problem. The politician problem definitely plays into that. But when the appetite throughout the populace is we need to spend more money on X, then that is inevitably going to create your problems.
Don't close my schools. Don't close my schools, bro. So spend whatever you got to do to keep my school open. It's the appetite for spending. Oh, as long as I don't have to pay for it. Or as long as, middle and lower income will pay for it. As long as, take all the PFD. What they don't understand is people who've said to me, well, they should just take all of the PFD. I'm like, okay. So we take all the PFD. What happens in 3 years?
We'll be back to tax after that. Yeah.
Based on the current rate of spend, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, 9 years, 10 years, 11 years, 12 years, 13 years, 14 years, 15 years, 16 years, 17 years, 18 years, 19 years, 20 years, 21 years, 22 years, 23 years, 24 years, 25 years, 26 years, 27 years, 28 years, 29 years, 30 years, 31 years, 32 years, 33 years, 34 years, 35 years, 36 years, 37 years, 38 years, 39 years, 40 years, 41 years, 42 years, 43 years, 44 years, 45 years, 46 years, 47 years, 48 years, 49 years, 50 years, 51 years, 52 years, 53 years, 54 years, 55 years, 56 years, 57 years, 58 years, 59 years, 60 Currently, what we're doing, if we gave them just said, signed it away and said, take the full PFD in 3 years, we're back here to, we have a deficit and you guys need to pay your way. You're not paying your fair share. Free rides die hard. You guys have got to do it. We'll be looking at a tax, and then they will spend all of the tax on top of that.
Right.
There was discussion in Fairbanks, about, putting a sales tax in Fairbanks to offset some of the property taxes. But we can look at it historically, and that's why I argued against the sales tax in Fairbanks, because you could see historically in other locations where they did this, they said, okay, we need to offset our property tax. We put a sales tax in, but within 7 years, both the property and the sales tax were higher than they were when it was just the property tax. Because why? It's Parkinson's principle. It expands to consume every available dollar out there.
Right. Yeah. Takes up every dollar, takes up all the space, takes up all of the time. Whatever you give it, it will find a way to use it all. And, this is the thing, is that we have to figure out a way to change the incentive and change that appetite. One piece that we've been looking at that's interesting is, if you look at the different states and you try to compare total taxes and spending, it doesn't really help you. But if you look at the way that they structure some of their taxes, it seems to indicate that the structure of the taxes, it does impact the spending. So some states make a lot of money off of personal taxes. Some states make a lot of money off of corporate taxes. What we've noticed is that the states that tend to depend more on corporate type taxes, so not just like a corporate income tax, but also, royalties and corporate property tax, things like that, they tend to spend more per capita than states that rely on personal taxes. And it's interesting, to me, to try to say, all right, how do we find an incentive for people to spend less money? Because in the end, that's the goal, right? We want a smaller government. We want government to spend less money. And because that means that the rest of it is going to be available for the private sector in the long run. How do we change those incentives so that we end up with smaller spending, smaller government? And that's the task ahead of us, I think.
Well, I mean, that's the question. Again, it goes back to the public versus the private economy. The private economy, especially in the form of an income tax, the people would then be motivated to do something. Now, I know then somebody says, well, what about California? Well, you see what's happening in California, the mass exodus, people are voting with their feet because they can't afford it anymore. Maybe that's not the solution we're talking about. Maybe people need to be more engaged and involved, but it is happening. It is forcing them out. So something is going on, and California will have to face the music just like everybody else. 60 seconds here.
California is an interesting one because if you look at the structure of their tax system, they do a couple of things. One, they do a lot of corporate taxes that flies under the radar because of all their personal taxes, but they target the corporate sector pretty heavily. And number two is they tend to target that top 1%, that top 10% of income earners pretty heavily as well. And so that means that you've got the lower portions of it that go, oh, well, that's more spending that doesn't necessarily come out of my pocket, so I can vote for more spending.
Doesn't affect me. It's the inverse of Alaska, where we've got the lower 80% paying most of the bill versus California, where the top 10% are paying most of the bill. Neither one of those is a good situation. Robb Myers, our guest. Folks, we're out of time. Tomorrow, Brad Keithley, Chris Story. Be kind, love one another, live well. All right, Rob, final bite at the apple here. I'll give you the last couple minutes here. I mean, I don't know how you do it, brother. I'll be honest with you. I do not know how you do it, because the throat punching would ensue immediately if I was down there. I can't do that.
I mean, part of the reason I do it, I think, is because I can't turn away. I am psychologically incapable of turning away, and so that means that my options are either I come down here to Juneau and I rail against the system and try to fix it, or I sit at home or in my truck and rail against the radio. I feel like I'm being a little more productive coming down here and trying to actually engage with the system as opposed to shouting into the ether.
Right. Well, that was my justification for joining the assembly, and that because I was the same way. I could either shout on the radio, not into the radio, but on the radio, or I could do something, and I did. But man, the problem. Here's my problem. Here's my. Let me pontificate for a second. it eventually is going to come unstuck. Right? You can only do so much. You can only proceed ahead on the same path for so long before the train does eventually reach that broken trestle and plunge into the ravine. And when we hit that point, I mean, will it feel good to say I told you so? Sure. But everybody's going to get hurt. Instead of getting sick from the cure, we're going to die from the disease. And sure, we can rebuild it and everything else after the thing goes off the track and all that. But why? When we could see it happen, we could stop it now. But there's just not enough political will to pull all these things together and make it happen. And that's the shame. Like you said, there's such an appetite for spend, not just in the politicians. They're just a reflection of the people who are electing them. They're saying the things that people, give us more money. Yeah, we want that. Nobody is taking a moment to understand that that is not sustainable in the long run.
Right.
And that's the frustrating part.
Right. And really what we have to do is we got to, look at what some other states have done, look at what the economists have kind of come up with as best practice and say, all right, this isn't working anymore. What kind of practices can we come up with that set us up for success 10, 20, 30, 40 years down the road? Knowing that nothing's perfect, nothing ever lasts forever, but just doing the best we can, as opposed to saying, well, what helps me in my reelection in 2 years? Because that's effectively the model we've been on since the 70s.
Right.
And if we don't get out of that model, you're right, we're going off that bridge and it's going to hurt. And it's just a question of when and how bad.
I can never remember if it's Bastiat or Destartes who basically said, woe be to the Republic when they figure out they can vote themselves largesse from the public treasury. That's it's
de Tocqueville.
De Tocqueville. There you go. I knew it was one of the Frenchmen. And there we are. I mean, we're there, right? That's what that's what this spending problem is that they figured out they can vote themselves largesse from the public treasury, not understanding that is a self-licking ice cream cone and it will be gone one day. And then what do? Then what happens? Then everybody gets hurt in the long run. It's horrific. All right, Rob, wrap it up.
Oh, again, what matters more, public economy or private economy? What actually produces, what actually creates jobs, what is going to diversify us so that we're not stuck on this yo-yo path that we're on? It's the private economy in the long run that has to be the priority. And we're not there yet, unfortunately. And we have to change that.
Who you calling a yo-yo? That's what I'm asking. Yeah.
Me for doing this job.
I know, man, such a better person than I am. You are such a better person. Robb Myers, thank you so much, my friend. As always, educational. That's what it was. Entertaining and enlightening. Thank you so much for coming here and joining us. We'll talk to you again maybe next week. Maybe we'll get that final 1 week look out there from you. I appreciate you coming on board.
All right. We'll catch you later, Michael. You have a good one.
Folks, we are out of time. The Michael Duke Show continues tomorrow. Brad Keithley, Chris Story. It's going to be a good one. Entertaining, if nothing else. We will see you guys tomorrow. Have a great day. Be kind. Love one another. Live well.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.